Hi, this is Eric Martin with Board Game Geek. I'm here with Rob Doherty from White Wizard Games and Peter Schultz, designer of Sorcerer.
Yes.
I don't know, is that the final name you're set
yes,
up with?
Yes, yeah. Sorcerer is a really cool game concept that Peter came up with. He actually showed it to me last year at Essen, and I like the art and the look and the game mechanics so much we decided to work together and produce the game. Darwin and I have been doing some help with the development process, and Peter had a just amazing prototype last year with gorgeous art, really cool backstory, and some fantastic game mechanics. So Sorcerer takes like a TCG style game and a board game and meshes them together beautifully, so that you can get
something like bridge between the games.
So you can get a great TCG style experience in a cool, very quick, easy to play fashion. You build a character when you play. So at the beginning of the game, each person builds a character. Your character will define your deck. There are three parts to your character. There's your name, and your lineage, which basically provides your profession, your skills, and then there's your origin, where you background, where you've been, where you're from, where you've been adventuring. So when you do that, each of these has a cover card. You just shuffle them up and deal them out to players. So you might get this one, and I might get this guy. Then we'd shuffle up these, and then each player gets a random one of these cards, and then finally each player gets a random one of these guys. And then you just grab the corresponding decks that go with it. So basically each of these has a pile of cards that goes with them, and there's symbols on them that match the symbols on the cards, so it's easy to sort after the game. In the box, of course, it'll come divided up nicely. So so when you take these three together, you get a full name for the character. I can show that here. Peter, why don't you describe that while I pull up the cards?
Actually, I want to implement into the game some really hard story element, because for me, actually, story element is also so important like the game mechanics. So for instance, when you pick up these three sets of cards, shuffle them together and put off these three main character cards, you get a persona, the lineage, and the background card. You will create your own character. For instance, this is the Mizelda, the Demonologist, the Screaming Coast. You will get a name, and you will get your personal deck. Each of these sets are really unique. Your lineage deck brings you some different mechanics, some unique mechanics. For instance, there is a Hellfire Club, which bring you damnation counters, and these are doing some really nasty stuff to your opponent. And there is some Necromancer lineage from the Egypt, and you will bring some really huge combos with your graveyard and raising the dead and so on. So it will bring you a really unique engine into your deck, and combined with the sets from the background and the set from the character, each and every gameplay combining will bring you a different play experience.
So one of the really great things about trading card games is there are often really interesting combos and styles of decks you can build. Right. And if for players who put huge amounts of time into them, they can learn about the various deck archetypes, and they can build cool decks that do different things and defeat their opponents in different ways. Right. One of the beauties of Sorcerer is each of these little mini piles that you're randomly selecting has cards that work well with each other and have potential combinations with the other decks. So when you randomly select your starting character and you take those cards and you just shuffle them up to make your deck has built-in synergies, and it will function in very specific ways that are different with every combination.
Right.
So you get the joy of a really interesting, well-designed deck. But there's no work to put it together. You just randomly select these, shuffle the cards together, and you have a deck that will work in unique and different ways. And because you and your opponent can randomly select each of these three, there are a ton of different deck combinations and matchup combinations that you can play just out of the base game. So it gives you a lot of really cool play. So speaking of the play, each player starts with a starting board. And this tracks your energy, which you use to play your cards, and it tracks your actions. In the course of a turn, players go back and forth spending an action. So, and you have a 8-card starting hand, and each of your cards has a cost in energy in the cost in energy at the top of the card. So there are 2 types of cards that we have here. We got a minion and a sorcery, and then finally the third type is the possession card. Minions get played on the board. They have an offense and a defense. The defense is how much damage it takes to kill them, and damage sticks on characters. So when something takes damage, you put a damage counter on it. If its damage is equal to its defense, it dies. Right. The red number is your offense. That tells you how many dice that character will roll in combat. The dice are here, and basically you have blanks, you have single hits, you have a double hit, and then you have a critical hit. So if a thing had 3 attacks, you just grab 3 dice, and when it attacks, you would roll those dice, and you count up your hits. When you play one of these minions, you have to choose which battlefield you're playing it in. There are 3 battlefields. And when you play a minion, you place it in one of those 3 battlefields. The minions only interact with that battlefield, so they'll be fighting in that battlefield. And if they have an effect when they come into play, it'll happen in that battlefield. So you've got 3 local battles. So each turn, you have these 6 actions. So when to play the minion, I would spend an action. So I start with 6, I go down to 5 actions. I have a cost of 3 on that card, so it costs me 3 energy. So that goes down by 3 points, and then I choose which of the battlefields to place them in. So I'll place this minion here. On your turn, you have you have 6 actions. So I take an action, then my opponent takes an action. So it's a shared turn. We go back and forth using actions, and there are a ton of choices on what you can do with your actions. You can play a card. So like I played this minion here. You can, if you don't like the choices in your hand, you can draw two more cards for an action. You can use an action to gain 2 energy to power up cards that you want to use later. So there's always good options for you to choose from. There are, so we talked about the minion cards. These are guys who stay in the battlefields. There are sorcery cards, and when you play a sorcery card, it will have an effect on the game. It can affect any location, or sometimes all locations, or your opponent basically read the card, do what it says, and then it goes to your discard pile called your graveyard. Many of the cards will have a little omen symbol on them. When you play the card, you would grab a counter and put it into your omen counter pile. So you just grab it and throw it in there, and that's useful later in the game when you get to combat. So we'll go back and forth, taking actions, playing guys into the battlefield, playing sorcery cards, maybe enhancing the guys we have in play with equipment cards that go onto them and modify their stats, give them extra abilities, and then you go to the battle portion of the turn. So once we've each taken our 6 actions, then it goes to the battle phase, and you resolve combat in each of the various locations. So starting with, you start with battlefield 1, then you go to do everybody there, then you go to battlefield 2, then you go to battlefield 3. So you put a couple champions over here. If you, when you get to a battlefield, you can, the player who has initiative, so you have initiative passes back and forth between players. You have the initiative for the entire turn. The player with initiative goes first in battlefield 1. When you go, you turn a guy sideways to indicate he's attacking. You take dice equal to his offense, and you roll your attack. The skulls indicate damage. The reds are critical hits. The difference between a regular damage and a critical hit is when I score a critical hit on my opponent, I decide where that damage goes. So I could damage any of the guys in their battlefield, or I could damage their battlefield itself. With a regular hit, my opponent, after I've done all my criticals, my opponent decides where to assign that damage. So they can assign the damage to the battlefield, and that doesn't hurt them at all. But if the battlefield gets to 12 on their side, then I've won that battlefield. The battlefield would flip over, and I'd put a control marker on my side of it. If I control 2 of the 3 battlefields, I win the game. Okay. Once my guy has gone and I've rolled my dice, applied my damage, then my opponent gets to go with a guy. There is a lot of things that minimize the effect of luck in the game. So you have these Omen tokens that you've been getting throughout the course of your turn. You can use an Omen token to re-roll any individual die, either done by you or by your opponent. So if, for example, I wanted to try and get another hit out of this, I could spend an Omen token and re-roll this die. If my opponent's afraid of the amount of damage that I'm doing, they could take some of my hits, try and, or maybe I got a double hit, they can try and reduce that down. Also, the player who has the initiative, they have a coin to represent it, and when you can flip that coin over to the tail side once while you have initiative to force a reroll on an entire set of dice. So basically, when you roll the dice, you modify it back and forth until both players pass, and then apply the damage.
So if I may,
yeah.
you constantly are managing the situation when you are playing. So, for instance, I will score a really bad hit, but I have only 2 Omen tokens, for instance, but I see that opponent did not attack anymore. So I will not reroll this, because I will need maybe rerolls and he will roll the critical hits. So I constantly need to manage this luck, how to say.
Right.
So each of these battlefields is its own like mini arena. Once we've dealt with battlefield 1, we go on to battlefield 2. The player who has initiative for the turn goes second in battlefield 2 and first in battlefields 1 and 3. Right. If a guy is killed before he acts, he doesn't get to act. And when you act with a guy, you just turn him sideways. And in each battlefield, you will take turns going back and forth, taking actions with your guys, turning a guy sideways, he makes his attack, or sometimes guys have other things they can do by in exchange. So you get these really interesting battlefield tactics. Do you want to move guys around? Where do you want to concentrate your cards? Where do you want to concentrate your rerolls? And if you can win 2 out of 3 battlefields, you win the game.
Okay, taking turns back and forth as you finish each round.
Yeah, and
you pass initiative and then continue.
Omens are transferred from turn to turn, and on the second turn, it's additional choice of the player, which have a fate token. That the fate is on his side this turn. He decides if he wants to roll for an energy, and the energy will be added to both players, or if he decides to take 4, and both players are constantly add 4 energy. Right. And this is also some strategic element into
So when you start the next turn, each player gets new energy. You can either take the default amount of 4 energy, or the player who has the initiative can decide to roll a die to determine how much energy you get. So maybe both players will get 1, maybe they'll get 8. It can be a varying number. So depending on the cards you have in your hand, it may modify your strategy on what you want to do. Whether
Especially
you want to roll
too,
dice,
if you have nothing and your opponent has 9.
So basically, if
You
you're
will test your luck.
yeah, so that's one of the. So you may at the end of your opponent's turn want to build up your energy using your actions, but if you build it up too high, they may choose to roll the die. If they get a big number, you're gonna have wasted some energy. So.
Right. Okay. All right. Thanks very much for the overview here.
Thank you.
There's a lot going on. I know this is your first outside design.
Yes.
In terms of what White Wizard is doing. So.
Yeah, and this is our first outside design. It's also our first sort of large box game. So with Star Realms and with Epic and with Hero Realms, we've had very small packages, portable games. This one is going to have very nice components, dice and beads and player boards. So there's a lot going on in the game, but it's just such a beautiful work between the graphic design, the art that's in it, and there's a lot of story worked in behind every card. It seemed like a great project to expand into the larger games with. So so it'll be a larger box game, a little bit different from the things we've been making before, but it's a really beautiful game.
And you do not need to buy 2 boxes to get the copies at all.
Right.
Each of these sets are fully integrated into the one box.
Right, with the choices you're
Yeah,
going to
so it's like the board game.
Yeah.
You buy a board game with a lot of options, with a lot of deck building strategies, and you does not need to buy 2 or 3 copies to have, everything is one box. It's like a board game.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much, Rob.
Thank you.
Peter, for the overview.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.